Hey everybody, Mr. The Fanboy here. This is my long awaited WCW video. This is also the introduction to other WCW videos and reviews. Been meaning to do this video for a long time. I initially wanted to do this as a slideshow, but I was too lazy to find pictures for it, so I decided to just do a normal webcam video of me talking about WCW. I got into WCW in 1995, and I've been a huge fan ever since. I've enjoyed WCW from 95 all the way till the end, all the way till 2001, and often consider after going back and watching the 89 through 94, I consider 1993. I think this is where Eric Bischoff arrived. Eric Bischoff, where he became the producer where he became the producer and owner of WCW in 1993, and I consider 1993 till 2001 to be WCW's best. Even though now that I'm older, I thought late '99 when Russo and Ferrara joined, I thought that was kind of terrible. Still way better than WWE today, but I thought that was kind of terrible. Now that I'm older. However, several awesome pay-per-views did take place during that period, but I consider the 93 to 2001 to be the best, and I also enjoy the 89 through 93, which I consider the early NWA WCW era, and I consider 93 till about I consider 93 till 99 the Eric Bischoff era, and late 99 that's the Russo era. Then of course you got the early 2000s, which is the the sorry the Kevin Sullivan era. Then of course you got um April of 2000, where Russo gained control, where Russo got power back in WCW, and I consider 2000 to be the Russo era. With late 2000 to 2001, that's the John Laurinaitis era of WCW. So, like I said, I got into it in 1995. Cartoon Network would play Cartoon Network. I was a huge watcher of Cartoon Network, which was also owned by TNT, which was also owned by Time Warner. Um, and um, and during commercials of Cartoon Network, they would show clips and trailers for the WCW Nitro broadcast, and I also remember the action figures of the wrestlers being everywhere. When I first came in, Hulk Hogan, it was pretty much 80s WWF, except now that I'm older, 1,000 times better. They had from 95 till about 96, from 95 to 96, they had the colorful, cartoonish gimmicks of WWE, but they had more in-depth storylines and much better wrestling, which is why they were winning for 83 consecutive weeks, which is why they were winning for 83 consecutive wins. But when I came in, Hulk Hogan, Macho Man, Flair, Sting, and the rest of the Four Horsemen, and Lex Luger were the top guys. With Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, Diamond Dallas Page, the late Rick Renegade Williams, Alex Wright, Mr. J.O., who was Jerry Lynn in a mask, and Dean Malenko, and Disco Inferno, Harlem Heat, Scott Norton, Nice Train being the the younger, more exciting workers. You also had other veterans like Paul Ordoff, in WCW, and of course Buff Bagwell and Scotty Riggs, the American males. the American males, and it just kept getting better and better. In '96, on I think it was the May 26th edition of Nitro, you had Scott Hall come out of the crowd during a match between the late Stevie Dahl and the Mauler. The Mauler come out through the crowd in street clothes, declaring war on WCW, and he came there. And this is still awesome. Every time I watch it today, this is still awesome. The angle that was taking place. You had Scott Hall debuting as the Razor Ramon character, declaring war on WCW. Then a couple of weeks later, Nash would make his debut, and he would powerbomb Eric Bischoff through the stage. Sting would answer the challenge to the war. It would answer the challenge to the war. Then of course at Bash at the Beach. At Bash at the Beach 1996. At Bash at the Beach 1996. Everyone was wondering who would turn heel, who would turn who the third man was, and Hulk Hogan. He came out. He appeared to help, but instead turned on his team by dropping the leg on Nitro and kick-starting what I consider one of the greatest stables and greatest angles in wrestling, the NWO. And I never get tired of it. The NWO, one of the best and most influential stables ever. And now that I'm even older and understand what the NWO was about, what the gimmick actually was, I appreciate this storyline much more. I couldn't think of it when I was a kid and believe wrestling was real. I always loved Hulk. I always loved Hulkamania. I always loved Hulkamania more. Now I kind of like NWO. Now that I'm older, I kind of like the NWO character more. Even though when I was younger, I always preferred Hulk Hogan as a good guy. Hulk Hogan was one of the greatest heels, but I never listed him as my greatest heels because I didn't want him to be heel. I didn't want him to be heel. You don't know how happy I was in late '99 when he finally went back to the red and yellow. When he finally went back to the red and yellow, but I'll get to that in a minute. And then also around this time, you got the cruiserweights: Rey Mysterio Jr., Psychosis, Juventud Guerrera, Ultimo Dragon, other wrestlers like the Japanese wrestler Kaz Hayashi, who was that other guy? Oh yeah, and of course Chris Jericho, and this guy wasn't a cruiserweight, but Billy Kidman. When you talk about guys who kick-started the cruiserweight division, you can't leave out Billy Kidman. Who kick-started cruiserweight, lightweight, that style of wrestling. And then the stable, then of course the NWO stable, which was originally just 3 members, will become bigger. Even in early '97, having their own pay-per-view sold out, then it would later, then I think in '98, it would later split into 2 groups. With the NWO Red, the NWO Wolfpack, and the NWO Black and White, and WCW. And I remember being a kid how awesome that was. Which brand were you? Were you WCW? Were you NWO? Or were you NWO Wolfpack? I remember how cool that was, and just how different pro wrestling in general was back then in comparison to today, where today it's just a niche audience thanks to WWE. It's just a niche audience, where back in the day it was the thing. Now it was where MMA and all these TV shows you see everyone talks about today as this is where pro wrestling was then. In '97 you had a debut of Goldberg, and I was a huge fan of, still am, and I was a huge fan of Goldberg when he first appeared, because there was nothing like him. You had this big guy wrestling this shoot fighting this shoot fighting MMA wrestling style and combining it with powerhouse style wrestling, which was a deep contrast to every other wrestler on the roster who was either some kind of martial artist, a luchador, or a luchador, or just a normal um powerhouse type wrestler. Goldberg was vastly different, and today I still appreciate Goldberg because he was one of the people who was bringing the realness. He was one of those wrestlers who was bringing the realness uh back to professional wrestling, and he was the most successful of the three guys they tried. Bischoff, he tried this with three wrestlers, having them having a wrestler come in and just quickly dominate the entire wrestler. First, he tried it with the late Rick Williams. He tried to create his own Ultimate Warrior, who would become the next Hulk Hogan, but Renegade, of course, fell because most people saw him as a poor imitation of the Warrior, and of course there was, I think this affected him more, the cease and desist order from WWE, which I hear because Renegade, despite the gimmick being mocked, when I watch old highlights of WCW, he was more over than I thought he was. But of course, he had the verbal burial on Nitro. He had the verbal burial by Jimmy Hart on Nitro, and he later went back to wrestling as he later just went back to wrestling as Renegade. He still had the Renegade name, but just went back just was just a normal wrestler after that. I think Renegade could have been a great wrestler. I think he could have been a great wrestler. And this is one of the only times I actually hate WCW. They wanted the next Hulk Hogan, but I felt he could have established himself on his own. Because I actually like Renegade more than Ultimate Warrior himself. Normally I hated in wrestling when they rehash gimmicks, but when it comes to wrestlers like Renegade, Lenny and Lane, and of course Lash LaRue, Lenny Lane and Lash LaRue, who are pretty much, these are Y2J ripoffs. I usually forgive it ripoffs if the ripoffs are actually better than the originals. Are actually better than the originals. Are actually better than the originals. I actually think Lash LaRue. Well, I think Jericho, when it comes to submissions, is probably better. I think Lash LaRue was a much better wrestler than Jericho, and I thought Lenny and Lang, who of course they had a gay gimmick, but they dressed like Jericho, and they even had the ponytail Jericho had back in late '99 and early 2000s. I thought they were more entertaining. So I usually hate it when they rehash gimmicks, but these are two of the only times I make an exception when they rehash previous when they rehash or rip off previous But then of course after Renegade fell, they tried it with my other, besides the NWO, one of my other favorite storylines in WCW was the Mortal Kombat storyline, the Blood Run Cold storyline between Ray Lloyd, aka Glacier, who was based on Sub-Zero from Mortal Kombat. Then you had Ernest the Cat Miller, who I always considered him the hybrid of Johnny Cage and Jax. And of course you had Chris Canyon, you had the late Chris Canyon, and Brian Clark, who of course Chris Canyon was a combination of Scorpion, Reptile, and Shao Kahn, and you had who, yeah, he was dubbed Mortis, Chris Canyon. Then you had Wrath, who was like pretty much Shao Kahn, who was pretty much Shao Kahn, and they did these cool Mortal Kombat storyline where these wrestlers would face each other's in various match types. The storyline, it initially it was initially rumored the storyline was in it because of course this was a cartoonish, even though Mortal Kombat was hugely popular at that time, this was a cartoonish storyline in comparison to the more adult oriented NWO. But it turns out that they ended this awesome storyline because they couldn't evolve the characters more in Glacier. I think he later turned on Ernest Miller and became a heel, and Ernest Miller would later become more popular, becoming a Muhammad Ali character and becoming WCW's second version of The Rock from a more comedic standpoint, whereas Booker T would become WCW's Rock, only he was more serious. And of course, Rav would later receive a mid card monster push, then would later form a tag team with the late Brian Adams as Chronic, and of course Chris Kanyon would later join the Flock, and after the Flock was disbanded, would later form a tag team with Bam and Bigelow and Diamond Dallas Page as the Jersey Triad. Then he would later become Chris Champagne Canyon, the pimp gimmick from the WWF, who of course got Vince Russo. This is when he came to WCW. Then he would later do the Who Better Than Canyon gimmick, where he was mocking Diamond Dallas Page. Diamond Dallas Page. Glacier was sadly to say was the only one who didn't amount to any much. He wrestled a couple of mid-card matches, then became a jobber, then was released, then was later rehired for a brief storyline with Norman Smiley, only to be released again due to cost cutting, due to WCW having money problems at the time. So, like I said, but yeah, that was an awesome angle. And of course, you had, like I said, WCW was just awesome at everything. You had the revolutionary NWO storyline. You had the NWO storyline. You had the cruiserweights and the various feuds they have. Rey Mysterio's, Chris Jericho as the top heel who pretty much carried the cruiserweight division with his mic skills, having awesome feuds with the likes of Juventud Guerrera, Rey Mysterio, and Dean Malenko. You had the Eddie Guerrero Rey Mysterio feuds, which are always classic. The Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko feuds, which are classic. Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero wrestled several matches during this period. Eddie Guerrero, he also wrestled several awesome matches with the likes of Fentley and people. Fentley was so awesome in WCW. He was so watered down in WWE, where with him and the Shillelagh and Hornswoggle, he was so awesome in WCW. He was never a main event star, but Finley was so awesome in WCW. William Regal, I thought he was underutilized in both WCW and WWE. I thought his best, believe it or not, was in Europe and Japan. William Regal, but yeah, um, yeah. Then of course, one thing I also loved around this time period is that unlike now, you did not have to be a main eventer to be a top star. You had got to be hugely popular or over. You had Jericho and Dean Malenko. You had wrestlers like Jericho, Dean Malenko, Eddie Guerrero, Perry Saturn, the Cruiserweights, and Booker T being hugely over and not being a part of the NWO. Diamond Dallas Page, the most over guy during that period, or hell, even Goldberg, who was making his meteoric rise to the top with his cool undefeated streak. I love how Goldberg, they debuted him with Hugh Morris, and in that match they debuted Goldberg like a jobber, and Hugh Morris hit his finisher, the No Laughing Matter. Goldberg surprisingly kicked out and would beat him, and would later defeat the likes of Jerry Flynn, William Regal, one of my all-time favorite Goldberg matches, because William Regal, he was rough with Goldberg. He was unnecessarily rough with Goldberg, unlike the other wrestlers. Those awesome matches with Glacier, where in one match I remember Glacier hitting a sweep, Goldberg hitting a standing backflip, then responding with a super kick of his own. Even the jobbers during this period were cool. You had past wrestlers like Rick Martel, the late gentleman Chris Adams, Steve Austin's trainer, Marty Jannetty, Barry Horowitz, Jim Powers. So like I said, that it was awesome, and it was then of course the NWO storyline. They never really had a real good ending, but they never really had an ending. But after it ending, I was You don't know how happy I was when Hulk Hogan, because as a child, I always wanted Hulk Hogan to be a face. I always wanted Hulk Hogan to be a face. As a child, I liked the Hulk Hogan, the Hulkamania character, better. The Hulkamania character better. Now that I'm older, don't really like the Hulkamania character that much. Still a huge Hulk Hogan fan as a wrestler, but I don't really like the Hulkamania character that much as I did when I was a child. But you know how happy I was when Hulk Hogan finally went back to the red and yellow. If you were representing the change in society, yeah, the '90s were all controversial. Jerry Springer, Crash TV, people were getting sick of that. They wanted more positive stuff. So Hulk Hogan went back to the red and yellow. Hulk Hogan went back to the red and yellow, and Hulk Hogan, he would later turn face, join up with wrestlers like Sting and Goldberg, with wrestlers like Diamond Dallas Page, Sid Vicious, Rick Steiner, and Kevin Nash being top heels. Kevin Nash being top heels. Then of course, it was good. It was good. Chris Benoit, he formed after the Four Horsemen disbanded. He formed the Revolution. He formed the Revolution with Dean Malenko, Shane Douglas, and Perry Saturn. Like I said, Diamond Dallas Page. He formed a heel stable, the Jersey Triad. The Jersey Triad with Bam Bam Bigelow and the late Chris Canyon, and also around that time, um, Barry Windham, the late Bobby Duncan Jr., Kurt Hennig. Actually, it was Kurt Hennig with the late Bobby Duncan Jr., Kendall Windham, and Barry Windham. They formed the West Texas Rednecks. The West Texas Rednecks stable, where they had this hilarious song called "Rap Is Crap," where they feuded with Master P's No Limit Soldier stables, and the Southerners. Despite the fact they were supposed to be heels, due to the fact that WCW was in a southern state, that was a southern audience. They were hugely popular, despite the fact they were supposed to be the heels. And of course, speaking of Conan, the first incarnate Rey Mysterio, he ditched the mask after the feud with Kevin Nash. He ditched the mask, and he formed the hip hop stable with Billy Kidman, Eddie Guerrero with Billy Kidman, Eddie Guerrero, and Conan as the filthy animals, and of course filthy animals. So like I said, it was awesome all the way up until Russo joined. As a child, I loved the late '99 era. Now that I'm older, I really don't like the late '99 era that much, but I did like several things, such as the mega pushes of Chris Benoit, Bret the Hitman Hart. Bret Hart, he came to WCW in '97, but I actually like his WCW run better than his WWE run, but he was only used as a mid carder. He was used as a mid card. He had an awesome feud with DDP and several awesome matches with the likes of Booker T, Luger, DDP, and more. But it was his feud with DDP, and of course a dream match with him and Sting, But it wasn't until late '99 where they really started using Bret the Hitman Hart the way they should be, and that was as a main eventer. They had him as a member of the NWO, and I loved his character during this period where he was this hitman guy, where he would use his devastating wrestling skills to cripple people. His promo on Diamond Dallas Page, his promo at World War III 1998, he cut an awesome promo on Diamond Dallas Page, Benoit, and Lex Luger, Lex Luger, Lex Luger, Lex Luger's, and he's one of the only guys to actually defeat Goldberg, Bret the Hitman Hart. But late '99, like I said, I love the mega pushes of Chris Benoit, Bret the Hitman Hart, and Jeff Jarrett, his monster push. Also, you had Dustin Rhodes, Goldust, I always loved the Dustin Rhodes character much better. I actually don't like the Goldust character at all now that I'm older. I like the Dusty. I like the Lone Star Dustin Rhodes gimmick and the Black Rain gimmick he had in TNA much better than the Goldust gimmick. The Goldust gimmick. Um other wrestlers during the other wrestlers you had during this period. You had Sid Vicious as a face after the cool Millennium Man gimmick he had back in late '99 when Andrade had him turn face and he feuded with Kevin Nash. And I remember them having a hilarious match, a powerbomb match where Jarrett, where Sid Vicious powerbombed Nash and injured him, and Jeff Jarrett interfered in the match and hit Sid with a guitar, and Kevin Nash walked over to the referee and told him, Kevin Nash, he was too weak to powerbomb Sid on his own, so he walked over there and told the referee, I powerbombed him and won the match. I powerbombed him and won the match at one of my favorite pay-per-views. Late 99, well, I didn't like late 99. They had several awesome pay-per-views, such as, so they had two awesome pay-per-views. They had three awesome pay-per-views, such as Halloween, starting in August, Road Wild '99. Then of course in September, Fall Brawl or Road Wild '99, where they had a they I love Road Wild '98 was terrible, but I love the Road Wild theme where they were outside with the motorcycles. They were outside with the motorcycles, and Road Wild, you had such an awesome car. You had the opener with Rey Mysterio, Rey Mysterio, the Filthy Animals, Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero, and Billy Kidman wrestling the Misfits, which was, I think it was the Dark Carnival, Vampiro, who was also awesome during this period. Vampiro and the Insane Clown Posse, in an awesome six-way match. Then the next match you had Harlem Heat. You had Harlem Heat. You had Harlem Heat. The newly reformed Harlem Heat, Booker T and Stevie Ray versus the Triad, the late Bama Bigelow and Chris Kanyon. Then of course you had Ernest the Cat Miller versus Buff Bagwell. Then Chris Benoit versus Diamond Dallas Page, United States title match. Then Sting versus Sid Vicious, Goldberg versus Rick Steiner, and of course, the main event, which was Hulk Hogan, Hulk Hogan. Oh yeah, before also forgot you had an awesome six-man tag team match between Shane Douglas, Perry Saturn, and Dean Malenko versus the West Texas Rednecks, Barry Windham, Bobby Newcomb Jr., and Kurt Hennig, and of course, I mentioned the main event, Hulk Hogan versus Kevin Nash, career versus career, career versus career. Then the next pay per view you had the Fall Brawl '99. You had Chris Benoit versus Sid Vicious, United States title. Kaz Hayashi versus Lenny Lane. Shane Douglas and Dean Malenko versus Shane Douglas and Dean Malenko versus the New Family, which was Hugh Morris and Brian Knobbs, Jimmy Hart's New Family stable. Then of course you had um um Perry Saturn versus Rick Steiner, Rick Steiner, and of course Hulk Hogan, Hulk Hogan versus Sting in an awesome in one of Hulk Hogan's Hulk Hogan, he had several awesome matches in WCW. Hulk Hogan versus Sting, and and um and yeah, then you had Halloween Havoc '99, which I don't remember watching, but I remember enjoying it. Then you had Mayhem '99, where you had the really cool heavyweight tournament, and you had the main event, which was, I loved how WCW had an awesome, despite all the Crash TV garbage. Vince Russo brought WCW. I love how they still remain true to what they were wrestling by having two pure technical wrestlers in the main event. That was Chris Benoit and Bret Hart. Chris Benoit and Bret Hart. Then of course you had Starcade. '99 Starcade '99, where where you had several awesome matches with my with my favorite matches being the match between Vampiro and with my favorite match between Vampiro and Dr. Death, managed by Oklahoma, who was portraying the fake JR character. The fake JR character. If Vampiro defeated Dr. Death, he would get 5 minutes. Him and the Dark Carnival, him and the Misfits would get 5 minutes with Jerry. Would get 5 minutes with Oklahoma. Oklahoma. You had I mentioned the hilarious powerbomb match between Sid Vicious and Kevin Nash earlier. Then, of course, you had Jeff Jarrett performing double duty tonight. You had him in a street fight. I think in a street fight, you had him wrestling Dustin Rhodes. Then later, he wrestled Chris Benoit in an iconic ladder match for the United States title, where Chris Benoit did a diving headbutt off the ladder. Then, of course, you had the main event of that night, which was the main event of that night, which was Bret Hart versus Goldberg. So, like I said, why I didn't like '99? I didn't like the various segments. WCW was pretty much always about wrestling. That they had, well, but I didn't like how Vince Russo he added various segments. He added various non-wrestling segments, and and um, and there was also this tag team called PG-13 that I couldn't stand. They were the guys singing the Nations of Domination themes in WWF, but they came here in WCW. They were this lame wigger like tag team. I just couldn't stand them. But there were several good things in late '99 and early 2000. Vince Russo was removed due to increasingly poor ratings. And then he was replaced with Kevin Sullivan. I loved early 2000 with the NWO 2000 gimmick, who I think reformed in late '99, and I I love this period because Jeff Jarrett, Scott Hall, and Sid Vicious were receiving Monster Push. This is also the beginning of Booker T's big singles main event push, where he was kicked out of Harlem Heat, and Stevie Ray got Ahmed Johnson from WWF and Clarence Manson from WWF, and together and along with the big guy from Masterpiece Rap Stable, they formed the Harlem Heat 2000. This is where Booker T, they took away the Flaming Tights, the T in Booker's name, forcing him to go by the name Booker Huffman, before later getting the Booker T name back when Stevie Ray turned face and retired from wrestling. But um, you also had Brian Adams. I mean, you also had Dale Torborg wrestling as the Kiss Demon, the Kiss gimmick. Vampiro and his Monster Push, which was going great up until Vince Russo got power back. Uh, Billy Kidman was being pushed hard. Billy Kidman was being pushed hard, and of course, Lex Luger debuted his cool Total Package gimmick, where he would come out and pose. He would come out and pose and he would come out and pose, and he would come out in a shirt and pants, and Elizabeth would take off the shirt and pants, and he would pose. He would pose in front of the audience before his matches began. And Brian Knobbs in his singles push in his tag team with Finley, who were wrestling in WCW's increasingly in WCW's hardcore division. I love WCW's hardcore division. Their hardcore division was much tougher and much more intense than the comedic hardcore division of WWF at the time. In the WWF at the time. Then of course you had um So like I said, yeah, um, um, so like I said, then of course in April 2000, the great rebooting of WCW where Vince Russo got power back and him and Bischoff teamed up and relaunched WCW, and this created one of my other all-time favorite storylines. That was the New Blood storyline, the New Blood, which was the young guys as heels versus the Millionaires Club, which was pretty much anyone 40 and older were in the Millionaires Club, and anyone younger, anyone who had been held down younger, were in the New Blood. This didn't last long, and the New Blood and Millionaires Club ended and was replaced with the new group of guys: Mike Sanders, the late Sean O'Hara, Mark Jindrak, Chuck Palumbo, and Mark and Sean Stasiak, who will form the Natural Born Thrillers, wrestlers straight out of the power plant who immediately came on television and started feuding with the veterans of WCW, of WCW, of WCW, and then of course, um, the Natural Born Thrillers would break up, and then of course Ric Flair would turn heel with Steiner and him Steiner, Rick Steiner, Buff Bagwell, and Lex Luger and Road Warrior, Animal, they and Jeff Jarrett will form the Magnificent Seven, which was the last major stable before WCW went out of went out of business. Before WCW went out of business, and I wish this is this is when WCW went out of business, and yeah, not much to really say much about WCW going out of business. I wish Bischoff would have purchased the company. I wish he would have purchased the company, but he didn't want to purchase it without a network to debut it on. And I wish TNT would not have canceled WCW. I wish they would have had patience. I wish they would have had patience because it wasn't as bad as people thought it was. And towards the end, they were sort of rising again. They weren't gonna take WWE right away. They would eventually have, because Austin and The Rock would have eventually left wrestling and the ratings would have went down. The ratings would have went down. But I really wish they would have continued. It was getting good with, like I said, you had the Magnificent Seven as the top heels with Sting, even though he was still injured at that time. He was still selling injuries at that time. Um, you had Booker T, Diamond Dallas Page, Kevin Nash as top baby faces with Stasiak, Jindrak, oh, Jindrak, Jindrak O'Hara, Lance Storm, the Filthy Animals, and of course, AJ Styles, who was Air Styles, and put in a tag team with Air Paris and all the young guys. I really wish WC, as much as I love TNA, WCW was much bigger, and I wish all of these guys you've seen in TNA, they debuted in WCW. I wish they would have appeared in WCW and ECW, because both of these were way better than TNA and Ring of Honor, which were the most successful, which have been the most successful promotions to come in existence after the fall of WCW. Several promotions tried it, but TNA and Ring of Honor have been the most successful. But I wish ECW and WCW would have lived, because these were much better than um these when it came to audiences were much better than TNA and Ring of Honor, or hell, even the promotion that came after WCW, the Australian promotion, World Wrestling All Stars. Wish that would have left, because that promotion pretty much picked up where WCW left off. TNA did that, but also did several new things, which is what I loved about TNA. Did several new things. Did several new things. Then of course so like I said, WCW, and I still enjoy watching it. I still enjoy watching it today, and I still enjoy watching WCW, the old school stuff, more than some of the modern stuff, especially WWE. I've always thought WCW was the better between WWE. Even towards the end when WWE finally got the rating, finally got the jump on them and was starting to win the ratings more. I've always thought WCW was the better product. They look more real. They look more real. It felt more real. The wrestling was 1,000 times better. I thought the storylines were better. The angles were better, and I the product overall was much better than WWE. Even towards the end. Even towards the end, you think of it, when WCW left, I actually stopped watching until the WCW wrestlers began showing up on WWE, setting forth the invasion angle. And after learning how Vince McMahon and Undertaker ruined the invasion angle, I no longer watch WWE today. If I want to see something of WWE, like I said, I read the spoilers and go watch the parts of one. I don't even do that anymore because the product is so lame. But WCW, and there's not been a promotion to come in to threaten WWE to make WWE better, or hell, even I want a promotion just just straight up destroy them, and represent pro wrestling the right way, like WCW did. But yeah, like I said, this was my salute and praise of WCW. This was also the introduction to several WCW videos and reviews. All right, I'm done.